Connect Run Club podcast, episode number 111, the Run S.M.A.R.T project with Brian Rosetti. Hey, welcome back, runners, to the Connect Run Club podcast. Excited to talk with you today, and I was truly excited to talk with Brian. We'll get into details of Brian, but he works with a true legend who I love to talk about. That is Dr. Jack Daniels.
Yeah, it was a great podcast, and this was actually round 2. But you didn't hear round 1 because I messed up. So they do a lot of really cool things. And he mentions I think their coaching clinic that just happened. But they've got some more coming up, I think in the fall, he said. Is that right?
Yeah, they potentially one in December. So we're going to keep you updated. So if you're out on the left coast and in Oregon potentially, we'll keep you updated as we hear something from them. Last time that we potentially were going to do a podcast with him, they were going to give our runners a discounted rate for that coaching clinic. So we'll make sure and keep you updated. We'll send you out information if they decide to move forward with that, because I may have to go to that one as well. So
yeah, they do some really cool stuff. Before we get into that, as always, we want to plug our Facebook group, a Strava group.
Absolutely.
Got, a lot of fun things happening. People setting PRs, people running their first 5Ks. So you guys want to check that out, you can go to connectrunclub.com/Facebook. And then something new we've got going on. We've got some questions about coaching, especially with Trey, getting access to him. And so what we're doing is we don't take sponsors on our podcast, but if you guys would like to sponsor us, you guys can do that over at connectrunclub.com/Patreon for as little as $2 a month. You can show support the podcast. It costs us a little bit of money to put this out, and so if you've ever found value from it, we'd appreciate that. But what's cool is you also have access to Trey at different levels to get some coaching, and so we have a couple guys that are doing that, and they're enjoying it. So go over and check that out, connectrunclub.com/Patreon. And a really cool thing we've got going on is you get access to some of our guests coming up, and so we can actually get your questions answered. So maybe in the future, if we have Dr. Jack on again, actually we've got Amby Burfoot coming on in a month or so. Yeah, next month.
That was going to be good.
This is going to be, so that would be October at the time of this recording. If you got a specific question to a former editor-in-chief and winner of the Boston Marathon, Amby Burfoot, you guys can get that one answered guaranteed. If you guys are on a certain level, so go over and check it out, connectrunclub.com/Patreon. Hey, but even if you guys don't, we appreciate the fact that you're listening, and we just love engaging with you. And again, come check us out over on Facebook or over on Twitter, and we love just hanging out and hearing how your runs are going. So.
And join us for some of our Thursday Q&As. We have a lot of fun doing those, so we usually have a lot of people watching live. So thanks for joining us on Thursdays too.
Yeah, and those are, like we said, usually Thursdays at 3. If you guys are listening to this at the time this goes out on Wednesday, so tomorrow we're actually going to be doing it at 2 p.m. Again, you can check that out over on Facebook. You'll see the links to how to get access to that. So talking about someone who can answer lots of great running questions, runs pretty fast, and they do some pretty cool stuff. Brian was a good interview.
Yeah, and you know what? I've been familiar with the Run S.M.A.R.T project since about the time that they started.
When did they start?
I think it was 2008, 9, 10, somewhere in that range. And I've actually used them for years. I remember the first thing I used with them is I used a 5K training plan, and that 5K training plan actually I think got me my PR, which is like 1804. 18 something. Yeah. So it was really, really effective. I've used them for different marathon training plans, and they use the coaching philosophies of Dr. Jack Daniels. So he is the guy who's kind of their head coach, and they have a lot of coaches. They have a lot of different coaches that work with them, and all of them are really, really knowledgeable. They have a great staff over there, and you can just hear it from Brian himself. Brian is a ton of fun to talk with, and he has some really, really great thoughts. He's challenged me in the couple of times that I've talked with him. He's challenged me in some different ways and some different areas that I've been truly excited to talk with them, and they do help a lot of runners. And Dr. Jack Daniels is absolutely one of the hidden treasures of the running industry, and I think we may have heard that from Amby Burfoot when we interviewed him during the Running Summit. He kind of said the same thing. We're like, hey, is there one guy out there? And he was like, yeah, that's Dr. Jack Daniels. So love Dr. Jack Daniels, love what the Run S.M.A.R.T project does. They from coaching runners to certifying and training coaches. They just do a tremendous job. And Brian himself, super fast athlete, and I love his thinking as a coach as well. Love the way he coaches runners. So just a pleasure to talk with.
Yeah, and we've actually had Dr. Jack on a couple times now. So if you guys look back, I don't have our list in front of me, but look back through the history, you'll see him. I know we had him on earlier this year, and I believe last year as well. So he's always a blast to chat with. But sweet. Well, we're going to dive into our interview with the Run S.M.A.R.T project and Brian Rosetti.
Well, Brian, thanks again for talking with us. Only three of us know that this feels a little bit like deja vu. We don't need to get into the details, but we may have done this before. But Brian, for our listeners who are kind of new to you, and I would love to get a little bit of background with you, especially kind of your running background. But I have known about you guys for a while. I've used the Run S.M.A.R.T project and done the certification. So I'm big fans of what you guys do in the running community. And of course, you can ask Brandon here. I'll probably quote Dr. Jack Daniels more than any other running guru out there. So love the content he puts out there. Love what you guys do. But hey, give us a little bit of your running background and where you got started running in the first place, and kind of what led you into coaching in the first place.
Yeah. So I started early. I think we've talked about this. So but I'm assuming no one else heard it. So
that's correct.
I'm going to repeat. So I started pretty early. It was my dad trained for a marathon early on who got me into running. I kind of got the bug. My older brother got it first and started winning some road races, and that's what got me into the sport, got me excited to get into the sport. We were a pretty competitive, athletic family to begin with. So this was, for me, it was like the ultimate high, in terms of connecting with my competitive energy.
Yeah.
This was the most frustrating at times, but I think that's what kept me coming back into the sport, was to try and get that perfect race and keep racing people and trying to improve as much as I could, year in and year out. And so I was competitive in high school. I ran at St. Joe's in Philadelphia, Atlantic 10 conference in college, and had a pretty successful career in terms of like conference and regional level. Felt like I still had more in the tank, so I wanted to put myself in a situation where I could continue to train. I saw too many runners leaving college who tried to work full time, but still, put in a ton of time training, and it was just, I just never saw it working out too well, and so I wanted to put myself in a good environment post-collegiately. So that's when I connected with Z.A.P. Fitness. They were just a few years into what they've been doing now for, it's been, 14 years maybe now at this point. So back in 2004, I was at Z.A.P. Training with them for about 2.5 years, and made some progress down there, and met a lot of cool runners and coaches along the way. Pete Ray is I think one of the most underappreciated coaches in the country, and we became good friends and close, and I learned a ton from him, and really he kind of inspired me to start coaching. And it was really his individualized training approach that got me into coaching, and that's when we started the Run S.M.A.R.T project. It was myself and a few guys from Z.A.P. And a college teammate who started it, and we really at first kind of saw it as an opportunity for post-collegiate runners to kind of give back to the running community. Right. As I said, being at Z.A.P. and running in college and running competitively in high school, I had learned so much, and then getting to meet coaches along the way, At ZAP, we were doing runs with Bill Rogers, and
Wow.
we had a lot of guest speakers coming in and out of there. And just from training across the country in different races and getting to meet other runners on the pro scene and learning from them, it was a great experience for me. And so we started bringing on coaches that were kind of transitioning maybe from training full time to looking for other opportunities, and some were still training but wanted to get into coaching. And so we started basically, as a online private coaching group. And we've got about 12 coaches on staff today, where we, basically review a client's profile and then match them with one of our coaches. We've got some national champions, sub 4 minute milers. We have got a few Olympians on staff.
Wow.
So it's all kind of grown just from within the organization. So, we brought on Mike Smith, who's now just actually left, who's director of track and field at Georgetown. Now he's at NAU. He's back in Flagstaff. We had Chris Miltenberg, who just spoke at the last VDOT clinic, who's director at Stanford. He was a Run S.M.A.R.T coach. So we've had some coaches kind of move on to bigger and better things, which is pretty cool. But we've had basically, we brought Mike on, who was working with Jack, and then we brought Jack on, and they were training with Alicia Shea. So we brought Alicia on, and then Alicia, we brought on Melinda Elmore, who's an Olympian, who also ran at Stanford because she's close with Alicia. So that's kind of how it's grown from within over the last many years, back to 2006. And so, that's kind of how Run S.M.A.R.T started. And from when I got into running, and basically that's how it played out. Kind of crazy.
That is. I would love. Here's one thing I would love to do. I would love to kind of get your thoughts on, maybe some of the even different coaching philosophies. And I'll just give you like one of the big takeaways that I have always heard about Dr. Jack Daniels is that I think a big thing for me that really caught me, I think 2 or 3 years ago, would really revolutionize the way I train personally, is the fact that I remember hearing him saying, if I can get the same results out of you doing 30 miles a week versus 60 miles a week, why do I want to have you do 60 miles a week? Yeah. And so it was really interesting, and it changed a lot of my training. Can you give us some of the general philosophies that you would say really applies to the Daniels method, and kind of what sets him apart from other coaches? Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I kind of was first introduced to this idea at ZAP. And Pete had the advantage down there that he only had maybe 6, 7, 8 athletes when I was down there. Mm-hmm. I think he might have a few more today, but and he was full time, so he was full time hours, dedicated just to less than 10 athletes. So everything was individualized. We had meetings with different athletes each week, and he had notebooks on all of us. I remember we had one athlete who he was from Brown, and he kept getting stress fractures, and it was kind of chronic. His one leg was kind of bowed, and I think something in his gait likely that was causing these constant stress fractures. And but he was down there training full time, really talented guy. Most of us who were down there training for the mile, and some of the competitors that we were racing against, they were probably running, I would say, at least 70, 80 miles a week.
Wow.
And doing maybe some cross training mm-hmm. and drills and other stuff in addition. So Pete just realized that, eventually that this athlete couldn't train at that volume. Mm-hmm. So he really found kind of a sweet spot between, supplementing with cross training. And I think it was to the point where he was only running 40 miles a week. It was about half the volume of what you would typically see of a runner. And this is a guy who ended up running 3:41 for 1,500 meters, which sadly isn't as fast today as it was back then.
Yeah.
I mean, back then it was ranked much higher than it would be today, which is cool because the U.S. has become a lot more competitive in the distance events. But my point is just that most coaches, I don't know, would have gone to that length to kind of customize or figure out a way to keep this athlete healthy, even though they were training at that or competing at that high level. So I think the mentality normally would have been, this is how professional athletes train. You're a full-time athlete. You got to put in this amount of mileage. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to compete at this level. But, Pete customized this guy's training in a way where he stayed healthy and he found a way to help him, still run pretty fast. Now, maybe if he was able to run more, he could have run faster. I don't know. But it's likely that he would have just gotten hurt. So same thing with Jack. I mean, the main principle with Jack is always find the least amount of stress for the max benefit. And what tends to happen is that you make progress maybe not as fast. It's more of a steady, long-term progression. So some athletes will get frustrated with that type of system because they feel like they can train harder. And when you feel good, you want to train harder. You want more. And that's when runners when they get hurt. A lot of runners get hurt when they're feeling like everything is just going so well. And we usually find major injuries. I was, at the top of my game when I had a major setback, sacral stress fracture. And right before that happened, I felt like I was on fire. I could do anything at that point. Everything was just clicking so well, and I felt so strong. So Jack system is like I said, it's really, that's what's great about the VDOT formula is it's really pinpointing, the fastest you need to run to get a lot of the benefit from that particular or that type of workout. And so there's a lot of confusion. Some people feel like, well, I can train harder, so maybe I need to turn my VDOT up. And really my goal is, to run 18 minutes for 5K. Maybe they're in 18:30 shape at the moment. And then they think that they should be running at the VDOT that equates to an 18-minute instead of training at their current fitness. So, which just is not, it's counter to what the studies show and what Jack's research has shown over the years. So that's what's cool. It's backed up by so much research. And like I said, the idea is that, find the minimum stress that really gives you the max benefit. And you can train harder than that, but, you're adding in more risk, which over time is going to keep increasing maybe your risk of injury. And the name of the game for us really is how long can you stay healthy? And even if progress is slow, over time, that steady progress is gonna beat, you making big jumps, but then having big setbacks. That's what's, most frustrating for runners is the big setbacks that, you lose confidence, you lose maybe motivation to continue to train or stay in the sport. So it's more, feel like the VDOT is more of a long-term, approach to staying healthy.
I was talking with another coach this week, Brian, and it's funny you mentioned that because as we all have athletes who will come to us say, how do I get faster? And really it was kind of simple, like, well, stay healthy and stay consistent. Now, there's a whole bunch of other stuff we can do, but if you can stay healthy and just run consistent over a long period of time, you're going to get faster. It's pretty simple.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember Jack talking about a sub 4-minute miler, and he said that the guy never ran faster than 62 seconds. That's 4:08 pace. for a 400-meter rep in practice, and he never ran faster than 31s for a 200.
Wow.
So in practice, he never ran even near 4-minute pace, but in races he would go under 4 minutes.
Wow.
And so I think the big takeaway for me and for Jack started, this was just feedback Jack was getting. This wasn't even an athlete that he was working with. And Jack's great because everyone, I think some of his critics feel that he's very, he's fundamentalist, that it's like, well, this is what we found and this is what you do and there's nothing else, to do. Just follow the book, but he's always open, he's very receptive and open to new ideas, new types of workouts. I feel like the Daniel's running formula is really, basic principles of how the body responds to stress and how we should train, but there's still a lot of creativity and flexibility in terms of what you can do. And so Jack started kind of applying that idea to some of his runners, where maybe under training a little bit like that is better because long term they're going to stay healthy, like you said. And most of the time, I would say 75%, 80% of my teammates in college overtrained and under-raced.
Wow.
So it was a large percentage. I was always kind of prided myself on the fact that they were beating me up in workouts, but on race day, I was beating them every time. And it was funny because my coach at the time was frustrated because he felt like, well, if I was able to train at a higher level, that maybe I could be reaching, higher standards in the races. But for me, that balance was, over racing, maybe under training a little bit was what kept me healthy long term. And so it's very common. So I always thought that was interesting with that miler because I think people have the mentality that they should run faster than race pace all the time. And hopefully then by race day, even if you run a little slower, that it feels comfortable and you can do it. But most of the time you get to race day and you're not ready to run your best because you've been overtraining a little bit, week in and week out. So I think it's a good perspective to have.
Speaking of that, last time we talked, you said something that I tell you what, it was one of those game changers for me, and I think all of our runners should really listen to this. I would love you to elaborate on this. Last time we talked about, because we've all seen the guy and probably been the guy who goes to the track and you're like, hey, we need to do this one in 90 seconds, so we go out and we do the first one in 75 seconds. I think that we've crushed it. And you said something last time that I thought was beautiful, and it was that, hey, instead of trying to run 75 seconds, how do we run 90 seconds on that lap? And how do we do it as relaxed and efficient and as smooth as possible? That to me was one of the first times I'd ever heard anyone say that. I would love you kind of elaborate on how do we become more efficient and relaxed as we run.
Yeah. So this again comes from Jack. Obviously, he's our head coach, but so it comes from knowing the purpose of the workout. If we're doing some fast stuff at the track or even on the roads, like we'll take marathon runners here in Central Park and do 200. We'll mark off 200 meters, flat stretch in the park and do some fast stuff or 400 meters. But it comes from knowing the purpose of the workout. So the beauty of knowing the research behind, the training and why we're doing certain things. And Jack always says, at every coaching clinic we do, is the most important, thing is knowing the purpose of the workout before you're doing it. And when we do repetition work, we know that it's to improve speed and economy. And in order to do that, you need to run fast, but with relaxed form. And so we talk to our runners a lot about, for 200 meters, it's not a long time. We know you can run faster. The VDOT pinpoints the pace where you're running fast but it should feel really relaxed. So a lot of runners feel like, well, I'm running faster, so that must be a good thing. I'm hitting faster paces, but they might be tensing up, or they might be fine on the first 6, but maybe the last 2, they start to tie up. They start to get tight. You can't run relaxed with relaxed form and with good mechanics when you're tightening up. Look at sprinters in the Olympics, and they try and drop their jaw to keep their face as relaxed as they can, so they're not straining and tightening up too much while they're running. Same thing, for middle and distance runners. We're trying to show them that you benefit from the workout by how much accumulated work you're getting in running fast, okay? But running fast with relaxed form. So, over 200 meters, as I said, you can run a lot faster than VDOT, is pinpointing for your rep pace. But the idea is it should be a pace that you can stay relaxed at 8 or 10 or 12, or maybe you're doing 16 or 2 sets of 8. And you want to stay relaxed on every one. You don't want to go a little faster and then just tighten up on the last couple, because that means then you had a few reps where you didn't run with good mechanics. Even though you were able to hit faster paces, pretty easily, you still tightened up too much. And in that case, you didn't get as much benefit from the workout as you could have. I've gotta hit the charger here, Trey.
Okay, it's no problem.
I just got the warning I'm running out of juice.
No problem.
1 second.
Okay, you're good.
All right, that should be good. Yeah, so for us, I think that's a great point. Is just, I always tell my runners, we know you can run faster on these reps,
Yeah.
So I try and say that's not the point today. The point is, how much work can you get in running fast, but with relaxed form? So it's kind of finding that balance, because the benefit of the workout comes from how much work you're getting in while running with relaxed form. And then same thing with, threshold work. We always talk about, doing mile repeats at your threshold pace. In order to improve your endurance, you need to run right at your threshold. And what tends to happen when you do mile repeats is that someone can run a little bit faster than the prescribed pace or than their threshold. And the work bout, or the distance of each repeat, is short enough where they can recover and go out and do another mile, maybe a little bit faster. Now, if you extend the work bouts to 2 miles or 3 miles, then they can't really cheat as much, because they hit their threshold. They might go a little beyond and they start to slow or tighten up a little bit. But the benefit comes from running right at it. And for 1 mile, a lot of times it feels almost too manageable. And again, runners will keep coming back to this idea that runners think more or faster is always better. And that's not the case when you look at, the research and even some examples that we've been citing with my teammates in college and that sub 4 minute miler who runs slower, than he races in practice.
Yeah. As we have maybe pushed the envelope too much, and if we do start bordering on injury, I know this is a very general question, but we get it from a lot of runners. Are there any kind of general rules of thumb that you use when you're looking at a runner who may start building up an injury or may start developing something? Are there any general recommendations you usually tell runners? I know this is can be a very specific question for runners, but are there any general signs you try and warn runners about maybe taking time off?
If they're feeling, sore or tight or something's hurting, or just in response to that.
Absolutely.
Again, this comes right from Jack, and what we generally say to runners is, and this happens probably more often when someone is sick or feeling a little bit under the weather. We always say, the research shows that you can take 5 days off in a row. Obviously, this is assuming you've been consistent,
right?
And you're not taking, 5 days off every other week or anything like that. But you can take, if you need it, you can take 5 days off in a row and pretty much not lose any fitness. And then you get to 7, 8, 9, 10 days, and you start to lose a little bit, but you get it back pretty quickly. So I think people always appreciate that when we tell them, because they're very anxious about missing their training and missing time, and I'm going to lose fitness. And so that always helps them, feel relaxed about taking some time off. So same thing goes, if something, for us, it's always like, is it tightening up more throughout the workout? Well, if it is, then, you need to back off, take some time off, get some treatment, talk to a physio, maybe do some active release is the big thing that we recommend. And then re-strengthen and slowly kind of stage or progress, coming back, whether you need to cross train a little bit, then build your running back up to, at least 40, 45 minutes, where if you can handle that pretty well, then, you transition back into doing, higher intensity quality work. Again, depending on what the situation is, what you're training for, how far out you are from your goal races. But that's always a good rule of thumb too for us, is if something's going on while you're running, is it a situation where it tightens up more during, or it's loosening up more during your workout? That's a big difference.
Yeah.
Most people, it's tightening up and it's not getting better during the workout, but they're still able to run through it. We try and express to our runners that they're just, setting themselves back even more when they're going out and doing that. So take some time off, because that you're not going to lose fitness if you're doing it within 5 days. Again, after 5 days, it's very minimal until you get up to 2 weeks, then you've lost quite a bit of fitness if you 14 days off in a row. But that's the sad part of our sport. Quickly you lose it. You can be training nonstop all year, and then 2 weeks, and it's like boom, you feel like you've lost a ton, but you can still get it back quickly. But those are some rules of thumb. So do some cross training, non-impact stuff that maybe help you maintain some aerobic fitness if you have to take more time off than you need to. Is something else that we talk about.
Hey, Brian, we were talking with John Davis yesterday, who is a coach and contributor for Runners Connect, and he had written, he loves to dive into the science of running, and so he had written a pretty good article on VO2 max, and it was funny, in the middle of, as that conversation, he starts talking about VDOT and the things he's learned from that. So we get a lot of questions from runners about VO2 max, and leads us usually right back to VDOT. Could you kind of explain kind of what VDOT is and the whole formula, and how we as runners can potentially use something like that to judge our performance and to get better?
Yeah, so VDOT is different than VO2 max in that it's based on performance. So it's based on speed of running. So, or factors in speed of running. So, ideally you have a recent race result to determine your VDOT and how fast you should train. Jack always, says, well, if you feel like you can train harder, then prove it to me in a race first. And I always like that, because we have runners that will show up and they'll say, well, I feel pretty good, and you're telling me I should run 7:30 on these mile repeats, but, I'm hitting 7:15s. And it's like, well, you just ran a 5K, the weekend before, and it's not, it was a pretty good race. They're saying I ran really hard. I felt great in that race. And so we always say, prove it to in a race. Now, if the race is straight uphill or in 90 degrees, like this summer has been, then that's a different situation, we have to kind of use Jack's temperature conversion on the VDOT calculator. But I think a good example to explain the difference, because a lot of people are confused about the difference. Since Garmin launched that VO2 Max software on their watches, or they introduced it on their watches, we get a lot of runners will say, well, Garmin's telling me my VO2 max is 58, and I just got a plan from you guys, and you're telling me my VDOT's 54. So what's the difference? How come you're training me at a lower level? And we just explained to them that the difference is that maybe once we're factoring in economy or speed of running, then they're scoring lower. So it's a more holistic score than VO2 max, which is just taking into consideration, maximum oxygen consumption. So think of VDOT as a more holistic score. If you go on the Runner's World message boards, you'll see a lot of, chat about, well, the Garmin told me 58 VO2 max, and it says I should be able to run, X for 10K, or my equivalent performance, but I've never come close to that, and the idea is that, well, that might mean that they're just not as economical.
Yeah.
So it's cool, because then they could then say, well, that's interesting, so maybe I need to do more work to improve my economy. So in that sense, it's a good thing, but it causes a lot of confusion, and that it doesn't factor in. Jack, when we do the clinics, he shows this great graph where he charts several elite runners that he tested, and their VO2 max scores are all very different, these three runners, but their 3K times are almost identical, all three of them.
Wow.
Their VO2 max scores were all very different.
Wow.
So factoring in economy, they were actually pretty equal runners when doing at least a 3K race. So that's pretty interesting. Those are it's kind of the big difference for us. And how we view it and explain to runners. It's more of a holistic approach based on a race performance. Obviously, if you need to estimate one, you can do that and try and dial it in. But ideally, you have a really good race performance that represents your current fitness to determine the best VDOT for you to train at that point.
Now, you mentioned some stuff earlier about training in Central Park. How often do you get to train out there? I mean, that's got to be phenomenal. I was supposed to do the New York Marathon a few years ago when Sandy hit, but when you said training in Central Park, I'm like, that has to be phenomenal.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I don't take it for granted. I enjoy being in the park all the time. It doesn't get old. I feel like it's just big enough where you don't get tired of doing a lot of the same loops or same, courses. But it's also, I think there's just so much going on at all times, like we're doing hill repeats one night. We usually meet around 7 p.m. and cool thing in the park, the downside is like, it's almost like it feels like there's always 10 races going on. It's that crowded.
Yeah.
But you can find spots. I know spots just from being in there forever that are less crowded. So we're doing hill repeats on this one section of the park, and near the top you can hear, I think it was like the anniversary of John Lennon's death, and it was Strawberry Fields is right at the top of the hill repeat. So you had about 200, 300 people at the top of this hill, just off to the side, singing, Beatles songs. And it was just awesome. Where I'm out there yelling at people, and they're just having a good time, because every time they finish the hill, you've got this whole crowd, singing, Beatles songs or John Lennon songs at the top. So you never know.
It's great.
The other night, actually, we were doing threshold work, and we were on this short 1.5 mile loop at the bottom part of Central Park, and the Beach Boys were playing a concert.
Oh, wow.
And so for like a good mile of the workout, on a good mile stretch, they were listening to the Beach Boys while they were doing their workouts.
That's
you
incredible.
see crazy stuff. That's kind of like the fun, some fun stuff. But it's always entertaining to be in the park in that sense. You never know what's going to happen, or there's just always so much going on. But it can be a little chaotic. Like, I think some people show up and visit and go for a run, and they just feel like, there's a marathon going on in the park. And it's like, and you could feel we could get on dirt, we can get on grass, we can find steep hills, we can find long flat stretches. It's a good place to train in a lot of respects, and just the scenery, the skyline you get in different angles of the city it's incredible.
That's amazing. Hey, do you guys, a couple questions on the clinics. First, do you have any more clinics coming up? And tell us also about the clinics. I mean, who typically goes to clinics? Is it coaches? Is it runners? Combination of the two?
Yeah. It's geared towards coaches. We have some runners that will come just to kind of learn more about the science of the sport and behind Jack's methodology. We've had 5 or 6 clinics. We've had Olympic medalist Lynn Jennings as a guest speaker. We've had Frank Gagliano, who coaches Team New Jersey, New York, a famous coach. We've had some pretty incredible guest speakers at each one. We had Chris Miltenberg, director of track and field at Stanford, at the last one in California. We don't have any more planned at the moment. We're in discussions with a group about possibly doing one in Eugene, which would be really cool, in December of this year. So that's still kind of up in the air. We're hoping that we can kind of finalize those details soon. But the clinic is really designed to, get coaches. It's mostly, I would say, the last clinic was a balance between private and high school coaches. Mm-hmm. We had a few college coaches in there, but the majority, I would say, it was close to a split between high school and private and club coaches. Every so often we get some aspiring coaches in there, and it's really Jack kind of teaching the book. It's a great chance. And a lot of anecdotes from Jack and stories, obviously, which is just, they're gems. He's still pulling some out that I haven't heard for 10 years. So it's amazing. There should be a recorder. Someone should be recording that guy almost, 24/7. Some of the stories that he told me a hitchhiking story the other day when one day he slept on the side of the highway because there were no cars coming by in the middle of the night.
Are you serious?
This is out like in Montana back in like I think it was like the 50s. It's unbelievable, the stories that this guy tells. But so anyway, back to the coaching. It's just a lot of it is, what he's learned over the years and how to season plan for high school coaches and private coaches, and he gets a little into the marathon. A lot of it is the science behind the different training types and how he invented VDOT and how to apply it, and just a lot of questions. And we do a session on managing athletes using technology, making that easier for coaches to manage big group environments, practices, or if you're a private coach and you have 30 athletes, how do you quickly manage them and customize their training? That's the big challenge for coaches is if you're working with a lot of athletes. how do you maintain that individualization? You take Central Park and you'll see some of these training groups have 100 people in them, and they go by like a bunch of sheep, behind their coaches and pacers. But they have a challenge. How do you individualize training for 100 people at practice? So that's kind of why we launched VDOT Coach, which is a coach management tool. Again, leveraging VDOT and the tools that Jack invented to allow you to quickly customize training and apply it to many athletes versus just being at Zap Fitness and having the luxury of a coach that is only working with a handful of athletes. So that's the clinic. It's an all one day event. And we hope to do more. You can get certified by Jack now, which is something that we've introduced more recently. So it's basically, those who have read the book or taken the clinic course, you can take the exam. It's 80 questions. It's actually not that easy.
It's not that easy. Yes. Yes. I was stressed. That's all I've got to say, Brian. I was stressed near the end.
Yeah. Not everyone passes this exam. But we have a lot of certified coaches. We have close to 200 so far that are certified. We're going to feature those coaches on the VDOT app early next year.
That's cool.
And we've got a lot in store to help coaches find new athletes, connect with new athletes, and work with them using the VDOT app. So it saves coaches a lot of time and allows them to, as I said, customize their training a lot better.
Well, Brian, I appreciate the work you guys do, and you guys have taken me to many finish lines, and hopefully you'll take me to the Disney finish line this January. I'm hoping. We'll see. But we're very grateful for the work you guys do. Love following along. Love the content, and again, thanks for all you guys do over there.
Likewise, guys. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And again, thanks for spending a few minutes with us, Brian, on the phone. And Brian, if you'll hang with us, we'll say goodbye properly. But runners, hope you've enjoyed our time with Brian today. Thanks for listening.